Good morning, students. My name is Shiney from the Department of Mass Communication, and the topic that we are going to discuss today is communication and the types of communication. First things first, let's talk about what is communication. So if you can see, communication is a process of exchanging information, ideas, thoughts, feelings and emotions through speech signals, written behavior. In communication process, a sender encodes a message and then using a medium sends it to the appropriate feedback using a medium. If you see next, we'll talk about the importance of communication, expressing thoughts, ideas and feelings, creating awareness. Communication is used to fulfill our goals, to avoid being isolated. It highlights issues. It processes and develops. It's used for processing and developing thoughts, and also used for educating the masses. If we first see, we have the verbal communication. Verbal communication refers to the form of communication in which message is transmitted verbally. So the communication is done through words. If you see next, we have the parts of verbal communication, that is oral and written. Oral communication is nothing but the use of voice through words. It's the oral communication. And the written communication is nothing but the written form of communication. So oral communication, in oral communication spoken words are used. It includes face-to-face conversation, speech, telephonic conversations, video, radio and television, voice over internet. These are the examples for oral communications. In oral communication, communication is influenced by the pitch, volume, speed and clarity of speech. Next we have the written communication. In written communication, written signals are used to communicate. A written message may be printed or handwritten. In written communication, messages can be transmitted via email, letter, reports, memos, etc. The message in a written communication is influenced by verbal and grammar, used writing styles, precision and clarity of the language used. Next, if we go, we have the non-verbal communications. Non-verbal communication is the communication where there is no use of oral or written words or language. So non-verbal communication happens through signals and symbols. Non-verbal communication can go without verbal communication. Verbal cannot go without a non-verbal communication. So that means the last point means verbal cannot go without non-verbal communication. That is, when you are speaking, when you are orally communicating, you most of the time tend to use the non-verbal communication also. That is through your facial expressions, to your hand gestures, etc. So importance of non-verbal communication. If you can see, we have a pie chart here. So 50% of the body language, and there's 10% of the words, and there's tone of your voice, that is 40%. So when you are explaining or when you are talking to your friend or somebody in person, your body language is most important. So that communicates 50% of your communication. So if you are happy to meet that person, your body language tends to be more happy and joyful, and the rest of the 40% is the tone of the voice. So if you're meeting somebody you don't want to meet, or you're sad when you're meeting them, the tone of your voice is low. If you're happy to meet them, your voice shows the excitement that you're happy and you're joyful to meet them. And the next is the 10% of the words. Usually when we see most of the expressions also convey a lot of words. So there's no particular word. So if you see somebody crying, you know that they are in distress. So there's no particular words that you have to tell for a person to understand what they are going through. Okay. Next, types of non-verbal communication, that is kinetics, that is body language, haptics, that is touch language, then then artifacts and environmentals, then chromatics, silence, sign and paralanguage or vocals. Okay, these are a few of the non-verbal communication types. Yeah, so first thing we'll talk about is the facial expression. Face is the index of the mind. Think how much information can be conveyed with a smile or a frown by facial expression. We can show how, or we can understand if the happiness or sadness or anger and fear through the facial expression. So we usually see that the expression on your face decides how your mood is for the other person. So if you're happy to meet them, you have a smile on your face, you have a welcoming smile, and your eyes are, twinkle. But then in the same way, if you're angry on somebody, you frown and you have a very the smile is gone and your forehead has lines and your eyes are like wide open, and you understand when the person is angry. And then we're talking about sadness. You see that the lips are drooped, and then the face itself is more, the eyes are smaller. So you understand if the person is sad. So that expression makes the other person understand what you are going through, and handle or communicate in that situation in a particular way. Okay. Until now we saw the different types of communication, the non-verbal types of non-verbal communication and verbal communication. Next we are going to talk about the different variety of communications. That is, the first one we have is the interpersonal communication, the second one is intrapersonal communication, and the third one is group communication. And the fourth one and the most important one is the mass communication. So let's talk about intrapersonal communication. It refers to the communication that transpires inside a person. So when you have the thought process in your head that is going on, and you feel like there's some tiny voice in your head that is speaking to you, that is nothing but you talking to your inner self, or you putting your thoughts out. That is nothing but an intrapersonal communication. So you can see intrapersonal or an auto communication therefore is important in contemplating, conceptualizing and formulating of thoughts and ideas before we actually include in an over communication. Just think about how your daily life. So basically think about how many times did you, in the morning you wake up and you make a to-do list in your brain that, today I have to do this, today I have to do that. That is nothing but your mind talking to yourself saying, I have these things in line. So that is nothing but an intrapersonal communication. Next, if we see is the interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication, this is a universal form of communication. It takes place between two people. So if you're having a conversation with your friend and you are sitting and having a conversation, that is nothing but a interpersonal communication. Since it is person to person contact, it includes everyday exchange that may be formal or informal and can be taken place anywhere by means of words, sounds, facial expression, gestures and postures. So if you're talking to your friend, that is a interpersonal communication. You're talking to somebody, your parents, your mates or somebody elders, that is nothing but one-on-one conversation with anybody is called as a interpersonal communication. Okay, the next one is a group communication. Group communication is an extension of interpersonal communication where more than two individuals are involved in exchange of ideas, skills and interests. So group provides an opportunity for people to come together to discuss and exchange views of common interest. So group communication is nothing but where are more than two people in a conversation. That again happens through words, expressions, facial expressions, body language, gestures, etc. So if you're talking to two or more people in a particular place, that is nothing but a group communication. Okay, the last but not the least, we have the mass communication. So mass communication is nothing but outside the realm of interpersonal communication exists another form of communication which involves communication with mass audience, and hence the name mass communication. The channel through which the kind of communication takes place are referred to as mass media. So so mass communication is nothing but when one person is talking or communicating with a larger group of audience using media as a tool is nothing but a mass communication. So both mass communication and mass media are generally considered synonyms for sake of convenience. Mass communication is unique and different form of interpersonal communication as it is evident from the following definition. Any mechanical device that multiplies messages and it takes to the larger number of people simultaneous is called a mass communication. So nowadays we see that internet, radio, television, print, these are the mediums of mass communication that helps, so it helps people or a person to communicate with a larger number of audience at the same time. So these are the tools of mass communication, the radio, television, print and the internet today. And also we can include the SMS, etc. You can see the examples there: TV, newspaper, magazines, films, records, tape recorders, video cassette recorders, etc. So the radio production process is divided into 3 parts. First is the pre-production part, where the process where we ideate, the ideation process, where we come up with the concept of the production, what is the program about, and we come up with the script writing and all that. That is the pre-production part. And then comes the production part, where the RJ is asked to produce the live show or a recorded show. And the next is the post-production part, where we have the process where we are editing the already recorded programs. So you can, in the post-production process, we also add the sound effects and the required jingles, the introduction, the ending, the advertisements, all of these are added in the post-production part. So the 3 processes, the 3 parts of the production are: the first one is the pre-production, second is the production, and third is the post-production. So coming back to these things, first let us discuss the formats of radio programs. So the radio program is basically divided into 3 formats. The first is the spoken word or human voice. The second one is the music, and the third one is the sound effects. So any program that you see or hear on the radio are made up of these 3 elements. That is the human voice or spoken words, the second one is the music, and the third one is the sound effects. So if you see, most of the programs that are produced on the radio are 80% of it is human voice or spoken words, and the next 20% is 20 to 25% is the music, and the rest of it is the sound effects. So going forward, we will talk about the different types of radio programs. So based on these 3 formats of radio, we will be discussing about the radio program, different types of radio programs. That's it for today. Thank you guys.